Okay, let's dive straight into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some truly eye-opening source material that's going to challenge literally everything you think you know about the food on your plate. We're looking at the argument that our modern food system is basically a matrix, one designed to prioritize corporate profit over our physical health and our spiritual connection.
So the big question the text poses right out of the gate is this. Are we feeling constantly lethargic and sick because our everyday food is actually intentionally designed that way? I mean, the source points to data from the British Medical Journal and the World Health Organization showing these massive spikes in cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and chronic respiratory issues. It really makes us stop and wonder, right? How did we get to a point where the very stuff keeping us alive seems to be making us chronically ill? Are we just victims of a carefully orchestrated system?
Part 1. The Illusion of the Modern Food Industry.
To shatter this illusion, we really just need to look behind the brightly colored packaging of a premium convenience food we see all the time, the everyday sausage. According to a former quality control worker cited in our sources, factories absolutely do not use prime cuts for these. Instead, they literally scrape leftover bones for what's called mechanically separated meat, or MSM. They press this stuff under high pressure into this pale, foul-smelling paste. And to make it look appetizing, they pump it full of chemical dyes. To hide the rotting smell, they flood it with MSG and liquid smoke. It's a brilliant, if disturbing, illustration that factory priorities are cost and speed, not your family's health.
Part 2. The History of Instant Food.
So how exactly did we fall into this processed food trap in the first place? Was it just a natural dietary evolution? Well, the source material argues it was highly calculated. Before World War II, humans mostly ate whole foods, right? Directly from nature. But the war created a huge demand for canning and unnatural preservation to feed soldiers. Fast forward to 1953, and the industry definitely did not want to lose those massive wartime profits. So they invented the TV dinner, convincing busy working mothers that cooking fresh food was just a waste of time. And by the 1980s, the text outlines how massive corporate monopolies basically took over, lobbying governments and paying off researchers to greenlight their synthetic foods.
During that monopoly era, the text shows how companies replaced natural ingredients with highly profitable, inflammatory substitutes. They pumped cheap corn syrup into pretty much everything, which the author argues totally exhausts the liver. They pushed refined vegetable oils processed with harsh chemicals that inflame our blood vessels. And they completely normalized MSG and artificial flavors. These literally manipulate our brain chemistry, getting us addicted to artificial savory profiles while totally numbing our taste for real, natural foods.
Part 3. Rice Politics in Indonesia.
Now, this industrial food complex operates globally, but its tactics are incredibly localized, which we see in this example. Historically, regions thrived on diverse crops perfectly suited to their environment, like sago in Papua or corn and sorghum in NTT. But the source notes that during the 1980s Green Revolution, a massive standardization was forced on the population. People were actually conditioned to believe that eating rice made you civilized, while eating local root vegetables meant you were poor. By comparing these two diets, the text argues that a natural harmony with the land was replaced by a forced dependence on chemically treated, uniform rice. Why? The claim is that it made populations easier for the government to control and track, while heavily enriching chemical fertilizer and pesticide companies.
All right, Part 4. Energy Residue and Suffering.
Okay, we've talked about the physical chemicals, but now the source dives into the unseen, spiritual toll of this industrial machine. And this is arguably the most shocking part of the material. Before meat even reaches the factory, the source details how animals are confined in incredibly narrow, stressful spaces. Zero sunlight, no natural ground. They're pumped full of hormones, antibiotics, to force them to grow to slaughter weight in a fraction of their natural timeline. It is basically an environment defined entirely by fear and suffering.
The core argument here is that when we eat this industrially processed meat, we aren't just consuming empty calories, we are literally ingesting an energy residue of that suffering. The source emphasizes that food carries a frequency. If an animal lived its whole life in a constant state of terror, that energetic residue stays right there in the meat. The author claims this actually explains why we so often feel physically heavy, mentally foggy, and spiritually disconnected after eating these highly processed, unethically sourced meals.
Part 5. Engineering Addiction in Children.
And look, this manipulation doesn't stop with adults. It is terrifyingly targeted right at our kids and future generations. Food companies literally employ chemists to find your bliss point. They essentially treat sugar and salt like narcotics to keep you and your kids absolutely addicted to their snacks. They meticulously calculate the precise exact ratio of sweetness and saltiness needed to trigger a massive release of dopamine in the brain.
So when children eat these snacks, they aren't satisfying hunger. They're getting a lab-engineered chemical hit to ensure they just keep reaching back into the bag.
What's really fascinating here is how our bodies process these different sugars. Natural sugars, like the kind in fruit or honey, come bound with natural fibers, so they digest slowly. But industrial sugars, they hit the system instantly. The text points out that by bombarding children's taste buds with these extreme artificial flavors from day one, the industry is creating a generation of flavor-disabled consumers. Kids who will completely reject a crisp, natural apple in favor of a chemically coated candy, basically setting them up for a lifetime of chronic disease.
It's not even just what we eat, we're conditioned on when to eat. Take the myth of the mandatory breakfast. The source points out this was actually popularized during the Industrial Revolution specifically to fuel 8-to-5 factory workers. It wasn't driven by human biology at all. By conditioning us to eat constantly 3 to 5 times a day, we never give our digestive systems a break. This keeps our bodies in fat storage mode and completely prevents a natural cellular cleaning process called autophagy.
Which brings us to part 6, steps to food independence.
So, if we are living inside this design matrix, what actionable steps can we actually take to reclaim our power and our health? The source frames these not just as chores, but as empowering acts of rebellion. First, read labels. If you can't pronounce the chemicals, just reject it. Second and third, shop at traditional local markets and do weekend meal prep to avoid those instant food relapses. Fourth, try intermittent fasting to trigger that cellular cleaning we just talked about. Fifth, eat mindfully with gratitude to neutralize negative energy. And finally, try growing your own food, even if it's just in small pots on a balcony. The author suggests these steps help us rebuild our connection to nature and let our bodies finally heal from years of chemical buildup.
Food is not just calories, it's frequency. This quote brilliantly illustrates the ultimate takeaway from this explainer today. If we stop looking at food purely as fuel to just get us through the workday and start viewing it as an energetic transfer from nature directly into our own bodies, our choices transform dramatically. I want to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder as you make your very next meal choice. What energy will you eat today? Will you choose the heavy, manufactured frequency of a factory or the vibrant energy of nature? Thanks for joining me as we unpacked this source material. Here's to making conscious, empowering choices for our bodies and our minds.